On our wedding anniversary, Rose saved her ex, who crashed the hall the moment it exploded. I wasn't there because I was in the middle of an emergency surgery. The next time I saw Rose, she was in a bloody mess, unconscious on the operating table. Afterward, someone asked Rose why she'd risk her life to save someone with no ties to her. Her response? "My husband is a doctor who saves lives, and he wouldn't like a cowardly wife." People were touched. But when she loved me the most, I chose to bow out quietly. A month later, at a departing ceremony for an international medical team, a reporter asked me, "Jack, what's the thing you've got no regrets about in your career?" I looked straight into the camera and calmly said, "Even knowing my wife shielded her old flame from the blast, I still stayed at the operating table and fixed her shattered bones." "Jack, are you sure you want to join the medical aid team heading to Africa?" "Yes, I'm sure." After I hung up, I stared at a photo on my screen. Me in a sharp suit walking arm in arm with Rose, all smiles as we strolled down the aisle. But now, the woman in that photo was fighting for her life in the ICU, because she saved someone else. A nurse knocked and came in. "Jack, your wife is awake." Behind a glass door, I watched Rose lying in bed, still as she'd been through 3 days and nights, covering over 50% burns across her body, her torso and legs in ruin. When I first saw her in the emergency room, I couldn't believe the blood-soaked sight. 3 days ago, it marked our first anniversary. Rose had put together an extravagant celebration at the city's largest hall. I got called away at the very start for a critical surgery. Right after I left, a madman slipped in wearing a vest of explosives, aiming at revenge on the world. Rose, in a bid to save her ex, Charlie, dragged him out with all her might and shielded him just as it went off. Half an hour later, she appeared before me, covered in blood. I saw Charlie beside her, untouched, but I held back my emotions and directed the emergency surgery. I took the lead, mending Rose's crushed leg. In the early morning, after 6 grueling hours, as I left the surgical room, I got a police surveillance video, the only camera that survived intact. 10 minutes before the explosion, in the corridor of the hall, I saw Charlie in a crisp black suit, pinning Rose against the wall. The footage was silent, yet I could lip-read his words. "Rose, I know you're married, but I want one last indulgence." He guided her hand to his heart. "Can your heart still beat wildly for me?" And then he kissed her. She didn't push him away. After witnessing that, having just finished a high-pressure surgery, I sat cold on the hallway floor and cried my heart out. The man she risked everything for wasn't me. When the nurses brought her over to the ER, they thought she had protected me. "Jack, she got hurt protecting her husband. You have to save her," one young nurse pleaded with wet eyes. In that moment, I couldn't care less whether Charlie would regret it for a lifetime. I just felt a knife twist inside me. Rose recovered steadily. The best dermatologist was on her case for skin grafts on her face, fixating it with precision. Though her back bore a massive burnt trail, red and terrifying. When she came home, she hugged me. "Jack, I almost thought I couldn't see you again, or worse, would never be whole again." She chuckled softly. "Lucky for me, my husband's a whiz in orthopedics. You restored my chance to stand. However can I thank you?" I couldn't resist tracing her cold skin, her perfectly healed face, even more captivating now. Yet to me, it all felt like a stranger. She allowed me with a gentle smile. "Had enough?" When Rose leaned in to kiss me, I turned away. "I'm exhausted, been all over the place these days." "Jack, it's been tough on you," she said, her voice full of tenderness. That night, with her beside me in bed, I couldn't close my eyes. Rose seemed entangled in nightmares. Sweat dotted her forehead as she murmured, "Charlie, Charlie." I bit back tears, as the pain in my chest grew fiercer with every word. Rose didn't know that I once found an old Polaroid pressed inside her book when I was organizing the study for her. It was from her high school days, a picture with Charlie at a school sports event. Young and vibrant, full of hope and dreams. His name was on the back, and back then, I deemed it a piece of precious nostalgia. I'd never pried. I had no idea why they drifted apart, but I figured what Charlie meant to her. He was someone she'd guard with her life. From 17 to 27, her one true love. So what was I? In the drawer lay a printed divorce agreement, waiting quietly. It was time to end it. The next morning, Rose limped her way to the kitchen, cooking breakfast herself. "Jack, try my cooking." I sat at the table, preparing to hand her the papers when there was a knock at the door. It was her assistant. "Rose, you left your phone at the hospital. I brought it for you." Rose took it, glanced at the screen, and her face tightened with worry. "Honey, I need to step out quickly. Enjoy your breakfast. I'll have my assistant drop you off at work later." I stayed silent, lifting a spoonful of steaming porridge as her assistant tried to hold her back. "Rose, you're not in good shape to be driving right now. Where are you headed? Let me take you. Go away." A wave of panic flashed across Rose's face. She seemed to realize she lost her cool but still limped away without hesitation. I looked down, seeing a status Charlie posted 15 minutes ago. It's a selfie of him right before bungee jumping off the tallest tower in City A. His face is streaked with tears and despair fills his eyes. He just went through life and death with the love of his life. Yet she chose to let go and find someone new. With my fear of heights, what else should I be afraid of? Goodbye, my love. My palm started bleeding from where I dug my nails in. Turns out Rose was in such a hurry because she needed to be with him. The last time we were at the hospital, Charlie didn't recognize me behind my mask. He added me as his attending physician. Rose showed me in actions what real love looks like. She's just that concerned about him. Every tear Charlie sheds breaks her heart. Right then, I got a call from the dean. "Jack, the list for the Africa Medical Aid Team is out. You're the best candidate, so you'll be leading it." "Dean, when is this happening?" "The 3rd of next month, for 2 years. The dean sighed. "You just got married a year ago, and now we're sending you off to such a place." I looked up with bloodshot eyes and smiled, unfazed. "Dean, saving lives is my mission. There are more important things in this world than women." Right after I hung up, I got a message from Rose. "Honey, something came up at work. I won't be back tonight." Then I saw Charlie posted a new status. It was a photo of Rose sitting across from him, cutting his steak. Caption: "There's this fool who's willing to drive 2 hours just to cut my steak for me after crossing dozens of miles. P.S. She says I'm more appetizing than the finest fillet. Some things just can't be replaced." In the corner of the photo, you could see the view from the restaurant window. It's where we spent Valentine's once. I specifically told Rose I loved their pepper steak there. I ignored her message and deleted it. The next day was my 29th birthday. Rose didn't come back the entire day. Lightning flashed and thunder roared outside, pouring rain relentless. I sat alone at the table, making a wish over a small 4-inch cream cake. Quietly, I whispered to myself, "Happy birthday, Jack," and blew out the candle. The silence in the room was deafening. Rose used to spend my birthdays with me for the past 7 years. We met during an international exchange at college, walked from campus to marriage. I never doubted her love. But I remembered on our wedding night, Rose insisted I wear a white shirt with 2 buttons undone. I thought it was just a little kink she liked and bashfully obliged. That was the only time I saw her completely moved, with trembling eyes red as blood. It's only now that I realized she wanted to see the college version of Charlie through me. And Charlie's favorite thing to wear was a white shirt. That fateful day, Rose got into a car accident on the highway because her right foot didn't react in time to hit the brake. Even the airbags deployed. When I got to the hospital, the emergency room was hectic. Multiple fractures, severe damage on the right leg, needs immediate surgery. A colleague quickly informed me. I saw Rose's pale face. She was unconscious with a gash on her forehead. My professional instincts kicked in, assessing her injuries. Secondary trauma to the right leg, a comminuted fracture. Even I couldn't put those shattered bones back together. A nurse handed me Rose's belongings, including her phone. A message from Charlie lit up the screen. "Rose, it's thundering. I'm scared. Please come back tonight, don't leave. Eric misses you too." Perhaps this message distracted Rose on her drive home. When Rose woke up, her right leg had already been amputated. The media was all over her story. Revered entrepreneur Rose, in a rush to celebrate husband's birthday, met with tragic car accident in a storm. An icon of modern true love. Loses leg for husband. Comments flooded in instantly. What an incredible love story. I heard Rose risked her life to save a stranger at an explosion site recently. What a remarkable woman. Yeah, she's so beautiful too. Wish she was mine. Reading those comments, I laughed bitterly until tears ran down my face. People have no idea. They think it's all love when it's devoid of any. Jack, my leg hurts, Rose weakly called to me. I approached her bed, calmly saying, "You'll need a prosthetic. I've already contacted the best specialists in Germany." A flicker of guilt crossed her eyes. "I didn't mean to miss your birthday that day." "Sweetheart, you don't need to explain," I interrupted. "I understand everything." A month later, Rose was discharged. When she first tried walking with a prosthetic, I helped her stand. She looked at me with deep emotion. "Honey, I can't imagine what I'd do without you." The next moment, I took a deep breath, stepped back, and placed divorce papers on the table. "Rose, let's get a divorce." Her smile froze in place. "I know about you and Charlie. At that explosion, you threw caution aside to save him. It shows how much more he means to you than I ever did." I chuckled softly. "And about that child, Eric. He's Charlie and Nancy's son, not yours. We both know your physical condition. I've just been pretending I didn't know. So I'm letting you go. I'll step aside." I lost count of how many breakdowns I overcame to say all this calmly. Rose stared at me, part skepticism, part fear. She couldn't tell how much I really knew. "We're just old classmates. What's gotten into you? How do you know about the child? Is it me who's lost it? Or can't you suppress your feelings?" I answered lightly, each word piercing deep. Tears formed at the corner of her eyes, and she desperately pulled me into a tight embrace. Even as the pain from her leg caused bleeding, leaving stains of blood, she was immovable. "You are my husband, always. I save others out of instinct. Even if it were someone else, I'd have jumped in too. Please don't misunderstand. The only person I love in this life is Jack." Rose tore up the divorce papers on the table when I wasn't paying attention, pieces of paper flying everywhere. She didn't know that way back when she signed the discharge papers. I'd already tricked her into signing the divorce agreement. Like she was trying to prove her love, Rose got a tattoo on the red burn scar on her back. It was a boy in a white shirt. She smiled and said that's how she saw me, always proud and radiant. But I knew instantly that the boy's shape and the shirt were just like the Polaroid she kept in her book. That was clearly Charlie. Rose hugged me, her figure still as stunning as ever, and cautiously said, "I got you. This tall pine tree, inked on me. Feel assured now, right?" She lovingly held my face. I just felt disgusted. "Jack, promise me, never bring up divorce again." "All right," I suddenly grinned. After all, we won't see each other again soon. The day Rose went for rehab was the same day I was leaving. At the airport, I was checking in my suitcase and got a coffee while waiting. "Jack? What a coincidence." I turned around to see Charlie in a casual suit standing behind me, his short hair neat. He finally recognized me and smirked. "Sometimes I really admire guys like you. Knowing Rose saved me, and you still performed surgery without batting an eye, serving her for so long." I smirked back. Never giving up on a patient's right to live is a doctor's duty. Don't you get that? "Oh, and don't really think her tattoo is about you." Charlie leaned into my ear and whispered, "The day I went bungee jumping, she freaked out and searched for me in a panic. She couldn't move well, and she said she'd raise Eric as our kid." Hearing all this should have crushed my heart, but I just chuckled. "If you like it, she's all yours now." At that moment, there was a lineup forming at the terminal. The captain and a special officer personally came to escort me. "Jack, the international medical team's plane is ready." I didn't look back at Charlie's shocked face. I took the ID badge and pinned it carefully on my chest. Then I turned around and walked to the security gate, not looking back. Rose spent the whole day training at the rehab center, gritting her teeth as sweat soaked her clothes. Each rehab session felt like breaking her bones again. She closed her eyes, the roar of the explosion still echoing in her ears, remembering instinctively shielding Charlie when the auditorium collapsed. At that moment, she only thought one thing. She couldn't lose him again. She couldn't face a lifetime of regret. But she still remembered Jack's frantic face and the sweat dripping when she was semi-conscious from the anesthesia. Those 3 days comatose in the ICU, Rose had a long dream. Rose was a neglected daughter of a wealthy family, always getting pushed aside and not valued by her mom. In her youth, she was punished by her stepfather to stand outside under the scorching sun, almost fainting. A shadow blocked the harsh sun over her. Charlie knelt down, offering her a cold drink. How could your parents be so cruel, letting you stand outside in this brutal sun? She didn't take it, just watched the gentle concern on his face. Seeing no response, Charlie shielded her, putting the straw in her mouth playfully. Drink, they won't find out. After that, Charlie would always sneak goodies to her. In their youthful ignorance, they were passionately in love, envied by many. Until that day, Rose, I'm going abroad. Charlie, eyes red but his voice terrifyingly calm, said, we should break up. Tears welled up as he said, Rose, I'm going abroad. Our paths won't cross from now on. We have to get used to life without each other, stand by our choices. And I don't want you stuck in our past choices either. So let's break up. Charlie didn't give her a chance to plead, leaving with just Rose watching. She was left watching him fade into the rain, heart feeling like a piece was cut out. Charlie wiped at imaginary tears, his face indifferent, lips curling in a cold smile. After finding out she wasn't the real heir and her mom's unstable standing, he made a cold, calculated choice. His decision. When it's time to cut ties, make the break clean or it's chaos. After their breakup, Rose was down for a long time. The heartbreak made her focus harder on what she wanted. She pushed herself to reach her mom's expectations, little by little, craving what she truly wanted. Years later, Rose, on a student exchange in France, met Jack. At the freshman ceremony, he stood on the stage in a white coat, his smile bright like summer sunshine. For a moment, she thought she saw young Charlie, but soon realized they were different. Jack was confident, full of life, like a fire that never dies. He'd defend his stance in debates, pull all-nighters in the lab, and bring her warm milk late at night, remind her to take care of herself, almost like he was tending to something delicate. Rose approached him cautiously, drawn to him like a light she never dared to wish for. Later, under the campus sycamores, she knelt with a bouquet of blue roses. Jack blushingly nodded. They walked into marriage together. Rose once swore she'd give the world to the man who healed her. She finally found happiness she'd never imagined. Until she met Charlie again. Rose realized the spark she felt years ago never left. Maybe the calm routine of marriage made her long for a thrill. The moonlight she'd lost in youth, now regained, sparked bright. One night, Charlie came to visit her at the rehab center. In the VIP room, he took the lead, and Rose couldn't help but make another mistake. Charlie leaned against her, his hands wrapped around her waist. His voice was deep and magnetic. Rose, I saw there's a Patek Philippe limited edition watch at the auction tonight. It'd go perfectly with the suit you got me. Other accessories just don't match up. As soon as you see it, you'll feel it fits me perfectly. Plus, with it on, it's like I have you by my side all the time. Rose looked down at his face, suddenly feeling a bit lost. The figure in her memory seemed to have started to crack, as if something was quietly changing. For a moment, she felt uncertain. Is this really the man worth gambling her life for, sacrificing a leg to save? An assistant knocked on the door and came in. He hesitated when he saw Charlie, and said, Rose, there's word from above. Jack signed up for a medical support group in Africa. Rose immediately pushed Charlie away and tried to stand up. She grabbed the assistant's collar, her pupils wide with shock and disbelief. What did you say? Rose, they said it's a UN humanitarian aid mission for children affected by the epidemic in Africa. The time and place are kept secret. He signed up himself and is likely already on the plane. Her mind went blank. Jack went to Africa? Rose was stunned beyond measure and unconsciously took a step back, loosening her grip. She muttered, "No way. How could Jack go somewhere so dangerous? I protected him so well. How could he endure such hardship?" She had seen the news. The Ebola virus was spreading severely in South Africa. Even the WHO had issued a warning. Charlie stepped forward and held her arm, his eyes showing disdain. "Rose, don't worry. Jack's probably doing it to boost his career and get some recognition. After all, when he returns, his salary will definitely double. Plus, it might be his way to get your attention, make you care about him more." Rose yanked his hand off and shoved him hard. Her eyes suddenly turned red. "What do you know? He could die." Her mind buzzed. The Ebola virus has no cure yet. It's like walking into a city of death. The horror of this virus is its transmission through mosquito bites, bodily fluids, childbirth, blood, wounds, mouth, nose, and eyes. Infected people have high fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and eventually die in agony. There's no cure and the fatality rate is high. Find out his flight details for me, by any means necessary," she yelled. "Yes, Rose. Rose, didn't you promise you'd stay with me? Don't go, okay? I'm scared. Just Eric and me at home." Charlie quickly stood up, clung to her arm, and shook it. "Jack has so many people with him, fighting side by side. But I only have you, Rose. Eric only has you as his mom." Something in his words set Rose off, and suddenly her emotions boiled over. She pushed him to the ground, ignoring the shouts behind her, and limped forward as fast as she could. She mumbled, "Jack, wait for me. I'll find you soon. Don't be afraid. Jack, Jack, wait for me." Suddenly, she stumbled and fell heavily to the floor. She hurriedly pulled up her pants and detached the prosthetic on her right leg, angrily smashing it against the ground. She raised her hand, pounding her stump furiously. Useless. Absolutely useless. After venting, Rose gritted her teeth, put the prosthetic back on, and hurriedly left the rehabilitation center. For the first time in her life, she felt a mess inside, a chaotic and frantic state. When she got home, flipping on the lights brought her down even further. The familiar setting felt empty and barren, everything spotless. She crawled up to the master bedroom on the second floor, frantically checking closets, watch boxes, and the desk. It was all empty. Everything of Jack's was gone. Not a trace left behind. It was as if she was hollowed out, crawling back downstairs like a lifeless shell. Sitting by the liquor cabinet, hugging her prosthetic. She repeatedly tried calling Jack, only met with a busy signal. "Sorry, the user you are trying to reach is not within the service area. Please try again later." The monotonous voice repeated over and over. She tilted her head back, taking a swig of strong liquor, which only deepened her sorrow. Rose finally broke down, frantically sending him voicemails. The moment he checked his phone, her messages would pop up. "Jack, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to you. I failed us. I was just temporarily confused, lured by Charlie and broke our marriage vows. There's Eric, too. I thought he was our new hope. Jack, I was wrong, really wrong. Please come back. Just forgive me this once. Please? I promise it'll never happen again. If you come back, I'll give you whatever you want. Honor, power. I can give you everything. Just be with me again." After sending the voicemails, Rose checked her messages every few minutes, anxiously updating her assistant. But there was no news, even by night. The phantom pain in her limb kept her in agony through the night. Finally, she endured until the early morning, lost as to how she made it through. The glaring sun woke Rose from her haze. Her head throbbed, a shelf of empty bottles before her deepening her frown. Finally, a notification brought a glimmer of hope. In her haste, its contents shook her to the core, nearly knocking her off her feet. It was a reply from Jack after landing. "The divorce agreement is now in effect. Rose, we can't just call it even. You owe me a life." Along came a divorce lawsuit document. Her hand trembled as she opened it, shocked to find he had already filed for divorce in court, citing infidelity. The papers somehow bore her signature, and the surveillance footage he uploaded was from the day of the explosion. It showed her kissing Charlie in the auditorium hallway. With such undeniable evidence, Rose's face was flushed, going from red to pale. Her assistant rushed in with a tablet, showing her the news report that he had seen. Rose, look at this. It was an interview with Jack at the International Medical Team's send-off ceremony. Jack, what's the thing you're most proud of in your career? Jack looked calmly into the camera and said, knowing my wife shielded an old flame from the explosion's shockwave, I still stood in the operating room and reattached her broken bones with my own hands. As soon as this interview aired, the impact was bound to be huge. Rose felt her heart skip a beat, overwhelmed with panic. So he knew. He knew about her past with Charlie, knew the truth about the child, and saw through her hidden selfishness and deception. That's why he was so disappointed. Disappointed enough to leave her for good. The assistant braved it and reminded her, Rose, the news is causing a huge stir. Our company's stock market is affected. It plummeted overnight. But Rose seemed not to hear him, gripping his hand like mad and commanding firmly, get me a private jet right now. I'm going to Africa to find Jack. Wherever Jack is, I will be too through life and death. Prepare all the necessary supplies. I'll bring them to Jack. I need to be his solid support. Charlie, just arrived after seeing the news, overheard her words, clenched his hands into fists and released them, trying to stop her. He held her tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Rose, listen to me. Calm down first. The critical thing now is to save our group's reputation and its stock price. Otherwise, the group you worked so hard for will be ruined, and you don't want Jack to see it end up like this, right? And right now, there's only one way to save our group. He blinked, suggesting, to stop the media's gossip, we can pretend to get married temporarily. We can say Jack was the one who interfered with our relationship. We can sort it out once the storm passes. Rose laughed in anger, finally seeing through his facade of wanting to be her husband. She cruelly pushed Charlie aside, her smile bitter as she asked, do you love me? Or is it my status you're after? Or maybe you just want to give your son Eric a legitimate family name. If it weren't for you, Jack wouldn't have gone to such a dangerous place to help, nor would he have divorced me. Everything was caused by you, Charlie. She furiously slapped Charlie across the face, then kicked him in the side, yelling, get out. You dare play Jack as the third party. How can you be so vicious? My only legal husband will always be Jack. If you think you can take his place, you're asking for it. Charlie doubled over in pain, shocked, and choking out. Rose, shut up. Don't say my name. Your voice makes me sick. Suddenly, she felt a warm trickle down her face. Wiping it, she found she had a nosebleed. Her body wasn't the same after 2 major surgeries. Her husband once spent 6 hours performing precise surgery that saved her life. And she had thrown away that limb, and with it, the only genuine love in her life. Jack was her husband, her true love. No matter where he was, she had to find him, had to keep him from being alone. She wanted him to know she was his wife, his support, and that she would face any challenge with him. Even if it meant death, she wanted to be by his side. When the plane landed at an African airport, a wave of heat and dust hit her. I tied back my short hair, pinning it with gel, and clipped a blue and white medical team badge to the lab coat sleeve. On the tarmac, UN Peacekeeping Force armored vehicles drove corpses wrapped in plastic to the incineration area. Jack, over here. The local guide, Joseph, waved at me. The situation in the epidemic zone was worse than reported, with 3 villages affected. Before he finished speaking, I jumped into the jeep. Out the window, the equatorial sun shone brightly on the tin roofs of the slum, blindingly. I gripped the medical kit, my palms sweaty and sticky. In the kit was a gift from Rose when I became a chief physician. A set of G-brand high-precision surgical tools. I burned all her gifts during the divorce, except this one. When I just got off, a dozen dark-skinned kids crowded around curiously touching my lab coat. They'd never seen an Asian male doctor before, Joseph explained. The locals said Ebola was a witch's curse. I squatted down, speaking in a newly learned local dialect. Hey, kid, I'm here to help. The smallest boy shyly held out his hand covered in blisters. I grabbed it without hesitation, ignoring my colleague's gasps. That night, heavy rain washed the plastic sheets off the quarantine zone. I knelt in the mud, performing a lumbar puncture on a feverish, convulsing little girl, lightning illuminating my sweaty face. The moment the spinal fluid tested negative, the whole medical tent erupted in cheers. Since then, fresh mangoes and cassava appeared outside the medical station, the locals' simple way of expressing gratitude. My white coat pockets gradually filled with colorful stones and notes from kids, with scrawled thank you written on them. Maybe God's watching over me. In those 2 years in the outbreak zone, I didn't get infected, just as death spared me in the explosion back then. When the third year's rainy season ended, I was chosen as an outstanding representative of the international medical team to receive an award back home. While packing, the little boy I saved clung to my leg, crying heart-wrenchingly. I knelt, leaving Rose's surgical tool gift with him, patting his head. Grow up and save more people with it, okay? At the award ceremony, under the flashlights, I calmly recounted my Africa aid experiences. When the host asked why I chose the most dangerous outbreak zone, I paused, then smiled. Some scars need to heal by helping others. After the press conference, I unexpectedly ran into Rose's assistant on my way out, caught off guard. Rose chased your flight to Africa and contracted the Ebola virus, so she couldn't return. This is what she left for you. She said your one-sided divorce agreement didn't take effect. She told the court you tricked her into signing it. The assistant sighed. Rose didn't have children. She had thought Eric was her hope, but later found out the truth. So by inheritance, most of her estate is yours. I froze. Rose hadn't married Charlie as I'd assumed. Instead, she searched for me, dying in a foreign land unknown to others. I took the paper bag. Inside were stock equity contracts and a land deed, a small island in the southern hemisphere. The registration date was on our last wedding anniversary. The final note in the letter read, "Jack, I'm sorry. Once I find the courage to explain, I'll come to bring you home. This time I will keep my promise." Memories etched 7 years back, beneath the plane trees. I told Rose I wanted to find a hidden island for us, to spend a long summer with my beloved. I looked up, eyes wet, suddenly breaking into a smile. Summer had arrived.